Alright, shalom, I'm back. Alright, now I'm in Josephus, right? We're going to deal with more on Esther. We're going to go to Antiquities of the Jews, book 11, um, book 11, chapter 6, verse 2, and 11, 6 and 7, and 11, 6 and 9, maybe. We're going to start off with Esther married to the king. Alright. How she get married to the king? It says, but the king having been found of her, he did not well bear a separation, and yet by the law he could not admit of a reconciliation, so he was under trouble, as not having it in his power to do what he desired, he wanted to do. But when his friends saw him so uneasy, they advised him to cast the memory, get rid of the memory of his wife and his love for her out of his mind, but to send abroad over all the inhabitable earth, and to search out for comely virgins. Alright, so he did his coming to America thing. He went to go look for a wife. And to search out for comely virgins, beautiful virgins, maids, and to take her whom he should best like for his wife, because his passion for his former wife would be satisfied or quenched by the introduction of another, and the kindness he had for Vashti would be withdrawn from her, and be placed on her that was with him. Accordingly, he was persuaded to follow this advice, and gave order to certain persons to choose out of the virgins that were in his kingdom those that were esteemed the most comely beautiful. So when a great number of these virgins were gathered together, there was found a damsel in Babylon, whose parents were both dead, and she was brought up with her uncle Mordecai, for that was her uncle's name. This uncle was of the tribe of Benjamin, and was of the principal persons among the Jews. Now it proves that this damsel, whose name was Esther, was the most beautiful of all the rest, and that the grace of her face drew the eyes of the spectators principally upon her. She was committed to one of the eunuchs to take care of her, and she was very exactly provided with sweet odors and greatly plenty, and with costly ointments, such as her body asked required to be appointed withal. And this was used for 6 months by the virgins, who were in number 400. And when the eunuch thought the virgins had been significantly purified in the aforementioned time, and were now fit to go to the king's bed, he sent or called one to be with the king every day. So when he had a company with her, he sent her back to the eunuch. And when Esther had come to him, he was pleased with her, and fell in love with the damsel, and married her, and made her his lawful wife, and kept a wedding feast for her on the 12th month of the 7th year of his rule, which was called Adar. He also sent Angre, as they were called, okay, or messengers unto every nation, and gave orders that they should keep a feast for his marriage, while he himself treated the Persians and the Medes and the principal men of the nations for a whole month, on reason of his marriage. Accordingly, Esther came to his royal palace, and he set a diadem, a crown, on her head. And thus was Esther married, without making known to the king what nation she was derived from. So this is how, I guess you would say, interracial marriage was between the Persian and the Hebrew. All right. So the king set a crown on her head, and then was Esther married without making known to the king what nation, what people she was came from. Her uncle also removed from Babylon to Shushan, and lived there, being every day about the palace, and asking how the damsel did. for he loved her as though he had been his own daughter. Now the king was made a law that none of his people should approach him. All right. Unless they were called when he sat upon his throne. All right. I'll read the note real quick. The note says, Herodotus, the historian, says that this law against anyone coming uncalled to the kings of Persia when they were sitting on their thrones was first enacted by Josephus, by him who first withdrew the Medes from the domination of the Assyrians and himself first reigned over them. Thus also says Saphanim stood guards with their axes about the throne of Tinus or Tunduus, that the offender might by them be punished immediately. All right. Where did they get that from? But anyway, it says, now the king had made a law, commandment, that none of his own people should approach him unless they were called, when he sat upon his throne, and men with axes in their hands stood round about his throne, in order to punish such as approached to him without being called. However, the king sat with a golden scepter in his hand, which he held out when he had mind to save any one of those that approached to him without being called. And he who touched it was free from danger. But of this matter we have discoursed sufficiently, says Josephus. All right. Now, let's get 11:6. All right. Now, it says, when Haman had made his petition, the king both forgave him the money and granted him the men to do what he had with them. So Haman, having gained what he desired, sent out immediately a decree as from the king to all nations. The contents of it were these: Xerxes, the great king, to the rulers of the 127 provinces of India to Ethiopia, sends this writing: whereas I have governed many nations and obtained the dominions of all the habitable earth according to my desire, and have not been obliged to do anything that is insolent or cruel to my subjects by such my power, but have showed myself mild and gentle by taking care of their peace and good order, and have sought how they might enjoy these blessings for all to come. And whereas I have been kindly informed by Haman, who on the account of his prudence and justice is the first to esteem and indignity, only second to myself for his fidelity and constant good will to me, that there is an ill-natured nation intermixed with all mankind, that is averse to our laws, and not subject to kings, and of a different conduct order of life from others, that hate of monarchy, and of a disposition that is pernicious to our affairs of business, and give order that these men, of whom Haman, our second father, have informed us, be destroyed, with their wives and children, that none of them be spared, and that none prefer pity to them before obedience to this decree. And this I will to be executed on the 14th day on the 12th month of this present year, that so when all that have enmity to us are destroyed, and this in one day we may be allowed to lead the rest of our lives in peace, now and hereafter. Now when the announcement was brought to the cities and to the country, all were ready for the destruction and entire abolishment of the Jews, the Israelites, against the day before mentioned, and they were hasty about it at Shushan in particular. Accordingly, the king and Haman spent their time in feasting together with good cheer and wine, but the city was in disorder. city was in chaos. They were having riots, same thing as today, race wars and all kind of stuff. Now, when Mordecai was informed of what was done, he ripped his clothes and put on sackcloth and sprinkled ashes upon his head and went about the city crying that a nation that had been injurious to no man was to be destroyed. And he went on saying this as far as to the king's palace, and there he stood, for it was not lawful for him to go into it in that way, that habit. The same thing was done by all the Jews that were in several cities wherein this announcement was published, with lamentation, crying, and mourning on account of the disaster denounced against them. But as soon as certain persons had told the queen that Mordecai stood before the court in a mourning habit, she was distorted at this report and sent out such as should change his garments. But when he could not be induced to put off his sackcloth because the sad event that forced him to put in was not yet stopped, she called the eunuch Archytas, for he was then present, and sent him to Mordecai in order to know of him what sad accident had befallen him, for which he was in mourning, and would not put off the habit he had put on. At her desire, then did Mordecai inform the eunuch on the event of this mourning, and of the decree which was sent by the king into all the country, and of the promise of money whereby Haman brought the destruction of their nation. He also gave him a copy of what was proclaimed at Shushan to be carried to Esther, and he charged her to petition the king about this matter, and not to think it a disrespectful thing in her to put on a humble habit for the safety of her nation, the Israelites, wherein she might deprecate the ruin of the Jews who were in danger of it. For that Haman, whose dignity was only inferior to that of the king, had accused the Jews, the Israelites, and had irritated the king against them. When she was informed of this, she sent to Mordecai again and told him she was not called by the king, and that he who goes into him will be, without being called, is to be killed, unless when he is willing to save anyone, he holds out his golden scepter to him. But that to whomsoever he does so, although he go in without being called, that person is so far from being killed, that he obtains pardon, forgiveness, and is entirely preserved. Now when the eunuch carried this message from Esther to Mordecai, he told him also to tell her that she must not only provide for her preservation, but for the common preservation of her people. For that if she now neglected this opportunity, there would certainly arise help to them from the Most High some other way, but she and her father's house would be destroyed by those whom she now despised. But Esther sent the very same eunuch back to Mordecai to desire him to go to Shushan and to gather the Jews that were together to a congregation, and to fast and abstain from all sorts of food, and on her account, and to let him know that she with her maidens would do the same. And then she promised that she would go to the king, though it were against the law, and that if she must die for it, she would not refuse it. Israel, make sure that we go to the king. What king? The Most High, the king of all kings. Not no dang president. Go to the Most High. Accordingly, Mordecai did as Esther had asked him, and made the people fast, and besought and asked God together with them not to overlook his nation, particularly at this time when it was going to be destroyed, but that as he had often before provided for them and forgiven them when they had sinned, so he would now deliver them from the destruction which was announced against them. For although it was not all the nation that had offended, yet must they so injuriously be killed, and that he was himself the reason of the wrath of Haman, because said he, I do not worship him, nor could I endure to pay that honor to him which I used to pay to you, O Most High. For upon that his anger hath he contrived this present trouble against those that have not sinned against your laws. The same supplications did the crowd put up, and asked that the Most High would provide for their deliverance, and free the Israelites that were in all the earth from this calamity that was not coming upon them, for they had it before their eyes and expected its coming. Accordingly, Esther made prayer to the Most High after the manner of her country, by casting herself down upon the earth and putting her mourning garments on, and bidding farewell to meat and drink and all delicacies for 3 days' time. And she asked the Most High to have mercy upon her, and make her words appear persuasive to the king, and render her face beautiful, more beautiful than it was before, that both by her words and her beauty she might succeed, for the averting of the king's anger, in case he were at all irritated against her, and for the consolation of those of her own country. Now they were in the utmost danger of dying, as also that he would excite a hatred in the king against the enemies of the Israelites, and those that had planned their future destruction, if they proved to be condemned by him. Right? When Esther had used this prayer for 3 days, she put off her garments and changed her habit, and dressed herself as become a queen, and took 2 of her handmaids with her, and one which supported her as she gently leaned upon her, and other followed and lifted up her large train, which she swept around the ground with the extremities of her fingers. And now she came to the king, having a blushing redness in her face, with a pleasant agreeableness in her behavior. Yet did she go in him with fear. As soon as she came over against him, and he was sitting on his throne, his royal apparel, which was a garment interwoven with golden and precious stones, which made him seem to be more terrible, especially when he looked at her somewhat severely, and with a face on fire with anger. Her joints failed with her immediately out of the dread she was in. She fell down sideways in a swoon, but the king changed his mind, which happened, as I suppose, by the will of the Most High, and was concerned for his wife, if her fear should bring some very evil thing upon her. And he leaped from his throne, and he took her in his arms, and recovered her by embracing her, and speaking comfortably to her, encouraging her to be of good cheer, and not to suspect anything that was sad on the reason of her coming to him without being called, because the law was made for slaves, but that she, who was a queen as well as he a king, might be entirely secure, safe. And as he said this, he put the scepter into her hand, Israel, and laid his rod upon her neck on the reason of the law, and so freed her from her fear. And after she had recovered herself and those encouragements, she said, My Lord, it is not easy for me on the sudden to say what happened. For soon as I saw you to be great and comely and terrible, my spirit left from me, and I had no soul left in me. And while it was difficult and in low voice that she could say so much, the king was in great agony and disorder, and encouraged Esther to be of good cheer, and to expect better fortune, since he was ready, if occasion should ask it, to give her half of his kingdom. Accordingly, Esther desired that he and his friend Haman would come to her to a banquet, for she said she had prepared a supper for him, and consented to it. And when they were there, as they were drinking, he told Esther to let him know what she had desired, for that she should not be disappointed, though she should desire the half of his kingdom. But she put off the discovery of her petition till the next day, if he would come again together with Haman to her banquet. All right. Now when the king had promised so to do, Haman went away very glad, because he alone had the honor of supping with the king as Esther's banquet, and because no one else partook of the same honor with kings but himself. Yet when he saw Mordecai in the court, he was very much displeased, for he paid him no manner of respect when he saw him. So he went home and called for his wife and his friends, and when they were come, he showed them what honor he enjoyed, not only from the king, but from the queen also, for as he alone had that day supped with her. So he thinks he's Mr. Big Shot. All right. He was also invited again for the next day, yet said he, I am not pleased to see Mordecai the Jew in the court. Hereupon his wife advised him to give order that gallows should be made 50 cubits high, that in the morning he should ask it of the king that Mordecai might be hanged thereon. So he commended her advice and gave order to his servant to prepare the gallows and to place it in the court for the punishment of Mordecai thereon, which was accordingly prepared. But the Most High laughed to scorn the wicked expectations, the wicked plots or devices of Haman. And as he knew what the event would be, he was delighted at it. For that night took away the king's sleep, and the king was not willing to lose the time of laying awake, but spend it in something that might be of advantage in his kingdom. He commanded the scribe, the writer, to bring him the chronicles of the former kings and the records of his own actions. And when he had brought them and was reading them, one was found to receive country on account of his excellent management of a certain occasion, and the name of the country was set down. Another was found to have present made him on account of his fidelity. Then the scribe came to Bigthan and Teresh, the eunuchs that had made a conspiracy against the king, which Mordecai had found out. And when the scribe said no more but that, and was going on to another history, the king stopped him and asked whether it was not added that Mordecai had a reward or repayment given him. And when he said there was no such addition, he told him leave off. And he asked of those that were appointed for that purpose, that hour of the night it was. And when he was informed that it was already day, he gave order that if they found any one of his friends already come standing before the court, they should tell him now. It happened that Haman was found there, for he was come sooner than ordinary to petition the king to have Mordecai to be killed. And when the servant said that Haman was before the court, he told him, call him in. And when he was come in, he said, because I know that you are my only fast friend, I desire you to give me advice how I may honor the one that I greatly love, and that after a manner suitable to my magnificence. Now Haman reasoned with himself that what opinion he should give, that it would be for himself, since it was he alone who was beloved by the king. So he gave that advice which he thought of all others the best. For he said, if you would have truly honor a man, you should say you do his love, give order that he may ride on horseback with the same garment which you wear, and the gold chain about his neck, and let one of your intimate friends go before him, ahead of him, and proclaim through the whole city that whosoever the king honoreth obtain this mark of respect. Don't that sound familiar? The rappers, they get, it says he may ride on a horseback. You can get you a car, you can ride nice, you get you nice garments, clothing, and then you get a chain on your neck. Bunch of sellouts. Bunch of dang heathen sellouts for mammon and luxurious things, and want to be honored. They want to be high priests. They want to sit in Moses' seat. They want to be more than who they are. If a man think he's more than himself, I'm not pulling these scriptures, but there you go. 3 things: he may ride on a horseback, wear the same garbage which the king wears, and wear a gold chain on his neck. That's what happened to these rappers, entertainers, Hollywood. You become a Haman and get yourself hanged. This was the advice which Haman gave out of a supposal that such reward would come to himself. By your own mouth you will be rewarded. Hereupon the king was pleased with the advice and said, go you therefore, for you have the horse, the garment, and the chain. If you get time, the horse, the garment, and the chain. Look who's getting those things. They're usually second in command, and they want the king's spot. And they're wicked devils, and they're coming with their own plots and twists, and they want to destroy what's being built. It says, Go you therefore, for you have the horse, the garment, and the chain. Ask for Mordecai the Jew, the Israelite, and give him those things, and go before his horse, and proclaim accordingly, for you art, said he, my eminent friend, and have given me good advice. Be you then the minister, the aid of what you have advised me to. This shall be his reward from us for preserving my life. When he heard this order, which was entirely unexpected, he was confounded in his mind, and knew not what to do. However, he went out and led the horse, and took the purple garment and the gold chain for the neck, and fined Mordecai before the court, cloth and sackcloth, and told him, Put the garment off, put on the purple garment on. Mordecai, not knowing the truth of the matter, but thinking that it was done in laughter or mockery, said, O you evil man, the vilest of mankind, doeth now laugh at our calamities? But when he was satisfied that the king asked him, he honored upon him for the deliverance he had procured him. When he convicted the eunuchs who had conspired against him, he put on the purple garment which the king always wore, and put on a chain about his neck, and got on horseback, and went around the city, while Haman went before and proclaimed, This shall be the reward which the king has given on every one whom he loves and esteems worthy of honor. And when they had gone around the city, Mordecai went to the king, but Haman went home out of shame, and informed his wife and friends who had happened, and this with tears, who said that he would never be able to revenge of Mordecai, for that God was with him. That's right. God was with him. All right. Now, while these men were then talking one to another, Esther's eunuch hastened Haman away to come to supper. But one of the eunuchs named Shadrach saw the gallows that was fixed in Haman's house, and asked one of his servants for what purpose they had planned it. See, what's in the dark will come to light. I'm gonna jump up. Now when the king with Haman were at the banquet, he desired the queen to tell him what gifts she desired to obtain, and asked her that she should have whatsoever she had a mind to. She then lamented, cried, danger her people were in, and said that she and her nation were given up to be destroyed, and that she, on account, made this her petition, that she would not have troubled him if he had only given order that they should be sold in bitter captivity. For such a misfortune would not have been intolerable, but she desired that they might be delivered or spared from destruction, annihilation. And when the king asked of her who was the author, creator of this misery to them, she then openly accused Haman, and convicted him that he had been the wicked instrument of this, and he had formed this plot against them. When the king was hereupon in disorder, and was gone quickly out of the banquet into the gardens, Haman began to intercede with Esther, and to ask her to forgive him as to what he had offended, for he perceived that he was in very bad case. And as he had fallen upon the queen's bed, and was making prayers to her, the king came in, and being still more provoked at what he saw, "O you wretch," he said, "you vilest of mankind, do if you aim to force my wife?" And when Haman was astonished, he was shocked at this, and not able to speak one word more, Shabshadas the eunuch came in and accused Haman, and said he found a gallows at his house prepared for Mordecai, for that the servant told him so much upon his inquiry, when he was sent to him to call him to dinner. He said further that the gallows were 50 cubits high, which when the king heard, he determined that Haman should be punished after no other manner than that which he had planned by him against Mordecai. So he gave order immediately that he should be hung upon those gallows and be put to death after the same manner. And from here I cannot forbear to admire the Most High, and to learn here his wisdom and his justice, not only in punishing the wickedness of Haman, but in so disposing it that he should undergo the very same punishment which he had planned or contrived for another, as also because thereby he teaches others this lesson, that what mischiefs anyone prepares against another, he without knowing of it first contrives it against himself, says Josephus. Wherefore Haman, who had immoderately abused